Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's my pleasure to host this with Dr. Benton, who will be speaking about Georgia O'Keeffe, as you all know. When you entered the session, your microphones were muted, and we ask that you keep them on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have a question, please enter it in the chat box. Following Dr. Benton's presentation, she'll answer as many questions as possible. So if you just put them in the chat box, we'll go through those later, okay? I'd like to introduce Dr. Janetta Benton. She is the Distinguished Professor of Art History at Pace University, New York. She is the recipient of 2 Fulbright Scholar Awards and regularly presents subscription seminars at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. She also presented her subscription series at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City every season from 1988 to 2011, and has lectured at the Cloisters in New York City, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, the Society of the Four Arts in Palm Beach, the Schimmel Center for the Arts in New York City, and elsewhere in America and abroad, including the I'm saying it wrong, Janetta, the Hermitage. I'm going to have to edit this recording, in St. Petersburg, and the Louvre in Paris, France. She serves as the expert lecturer on many Smithsonian journeys and Metropolitan Museum of Art trips throughout the world. A former resident of Paris, she taught courses in art history there as the art historian at the American Embassy. And we have exciting news, breaking news, I think, for us on September 14th. Her book, How to Understand Art, is being published in 5 languages, so keep an eye out for that. And with that, I present to you Dr. Benton.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I would like to speak to you, ladies and gentlemen, about Georgia O'Keeffe and early 20th century modernism in the United States. So I need to share screen so I can show you the PowerPoint presentation I have prepared for you. There, okay. Here we go. There's Georgia O'Keeffe. She was born in 1887 in Wisconsin, near the little village of Sun Prairie, in a farmhouse, one of 7 children. Her parents were dairy farmers. Her father was Irish. Her maternal grandfather was a Hungarian count and the source of her middle name, Toto. She is often described as an individualist, independent, self-confident, a determined, strong-willed personality. She decided to become an artist by the time she was 10 years old. She went on to live a long life of 98 years. As to her education, she studied art in various places, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, the Art Students League in New York, the University of Virginia, Columbia University's Teachers College in New York. She taught in Texas, Virginia, and South Carolina. Her early abstraction creates a tunnel-like sense of depth. Number 2, very similar, also 1915, charcoal on paper, is also completely non-representational. Her first abstract drawings were made in 1915. Forms are modeled, shaded to appear 3-dimensional and rounded. This curving shape will recur in her work. O'Keeffe's friend, the photographer, Anita Lilly Pulitzer, showed some of these charcoal drawings O'Keeffe made in 1915 to Alfred Stieglitz, a famous photographer and art gallery owner in Manhattan. Stieglitz exhibited 10 of O'Keeffe's drawings in 1916. Number 13, Special. Charcoal on paper is an abstract composition of curved and angular shapes and lines. O'Keeffe and Stieglitz had not met, and she did not know that he was exhibiting her work. Stieglitz mounted a solo exhibition of her paintings in 1917. To express her feelings, O'Keeffe turned to art, for, as she wrote to Stieglitz, this is Georgia O'Keeffe, "Words and I are not good friends." Rather than the written word, her medium was visual. She said that only abstract art permitted her to express herself. She became head of the art department of West Texas State Normal College, 1916 to 18, near Amarillo, Texas. She made her first trip to New Mexico and Colorado in 1917 with her sister, Claudia. From this time on, O'Keeffe would associate progressively with the American Southwest in her art and in her life. Please meet Alfred Stieglitz. Seen in this photo, Stieglitz, intelligent, well-educated, well-traveled, from a wealthy German Jewish family, was interested in various forms of art, especially photography. Stieglitz was an early promoter of photography as an art form. He encouraged modern art by exhibiting early 20th century American and European artists. Well, Stieglitz was infatuated with Georgia O'Keeffe's art and then with Georgia O'Keeffe. He invited her to move to New York. She accepted in 1918, soon moved in with him. Stieglitz was charismatic, dynamic, energetic, hardworking, perfectionist. She was 31, he was 54. Never mind that he was 23 years her senior and married. Here is a photo of Stieglitz and his wife, Emily. This is Emmeline Obermeyer. Stieglitz soon regretted the marriage, which was not consummated for at least a year, and he said he did not love her. But Emily was wealthy, and his own father, who had supported him, no longer was. Now Emily supported him. He opened several art galleries in Manhattan. The most famous was called 291, located at 291 Fifth Avenue. It was actually called the Little Galleries. Here, he exhibited photography beside painting, giving the two equal status. I suspect you are familiar with some of Stieglitz's own photographs, which include here, Winter, Fifth Avenue, and on the left and on the right, the steerage. Stieglitz first photographed O'Keeffe in 1917, ultimately making over 350 photographs of her. Here she is wearing a hat, hands clutching at her white blouse, 1918. Another photo of her, 1918, in a robe looking tired. Her hands were of particular interest to Stieglitz, and his photos give great attention to them. Two hands, one hand. Additionally, Stieglitz photographed her with her paintings, without her paintings, and also without her clothes. He photographed her in the nude, beginning in 1918 when she was 31 years old. Stieglitz's wife, Emily, returned home during one of these photography sessions, effectively ending the marriage, although 6 years passed before the divorce was final. Some of the nude photographs are artistic, as this. Other photos, how to put it diplomatically, tactfully, focus less on the aesthetic component, more on the straightforward, erotic. Back to her paintings. This is called Series 1, number 3, painted in 1918. The colorful curling shape recalls her charcoal drawings, which she compared to a musical motif. She said, her words, "Singing has always seemed to me the most perfect means of expression." And she goes on to say, "Since I cannot sing, I paint." And this is called Music, Pink and Blue, number 2, 1918. She numbered her works and titled them according to their colors. Well, these shapes would be repeated many times in her paintings. A natural form appears to have been sliced, as if seen on a slide under a microscope, magnified. Blue Flower, 1918, looks like a flower cut in half and the image greatly enlarged to the point of abstraction. Series 1, number 8, 1919, akin to a sliced blue apple. Red and Orange Streak, 1919. There are no recognizable, identifiable subjects here. The same is true of the charcoal abstraction with two half spheres, simply called number 17, special, also 1919. Simple, smooth shapes, curved and straight. In 1921, Stieglitz exhibited his photographs, including 46 of O'Keeffe, many in the nude. The exhibition brought him fame or notoriety, but for O'Keeffe, this is to a great extent what the public first saw of her. Not her paintings, but the nude photographs, making certain that she was in the public eye. Stieglitz at his gallery. I think it is worth noting that she posed for the photographs. She even helped to develop the photographs. It has been said that there is no such thing as bad publicity. Well, after the nude photographs were exhibited, her paintings were interpreted as symbols of female genitalia and eroticism. Through Stieglitz, O'Keeffe met the early 20th century American modernist painters, including Arthur Dove, John Marin, Charles Demuth, and Marsden Hartley, and other artists. To put O'Keeffe's work in context, I want to glance briefly at what her American contemporaries were doing. First, Arthur Dove, seen in this photo. This is Dove's painting, Nature Symbolized. O'Keeffe said of his impact on her, her words, the way you see the nature depends on whatever has influenced your way of seeing. I think it is Arthur Dove who affected my start, who helped me to find something of my own. Dove, encouraged in his art by Stieglitz, came to be considered one of the first American modernists and the first American abstract artist, creating the earliest purely abstract paintings in the US. Yet these abstract shapes are based on natural forms. He called this extraction, his term for his process of extracting the essential forms of a scene from nature. This description applies also to O'Keeffe's approach to nature. Number two, John Marin, seen in this photo taken by Stieglitz. Marin painted in watercolor. This is his Marin Island. His subjects are abstracted to the extent that they're just recognizable as this landscape. The colors are applied with varying viscosity. The effect is free, fresh, seemingly spontaneous. Stieglitz and Marin were friends for almost 40 years, Stieglitz exhibiting Marin's work and providing financial support. Charles Demuth, seen in this photo, his watercolor Sail in Two Movements is described as a cubist abstraction. Here is Picasso's influence. Demuth willed many of his paintings to O'Keeffe. Number four, Marsden Hartley, seen in this photo taken by Stieglitz, is another American modernist. Stieglitz gave him his first solo show at his Gallery 291. Hartley traveled in Europe, where he met the progressive artists. This is Hartley's portrait of a German officer. Hartley was influenced by the famous Armory Show of 1913, as it came to be known. This is the poster, which says that the Armory Show was held at Lexington Avenue and 25th Street in the 69th Regiment Armory. The official name was International Exhibition of Modern Art, as you see on the poster. Displayed here were approximately 1,250 works of art by European and American artists. It was the first show of its kind, and it introduced Americans to the recent developments in European and American art. Marsden Hartley exhibited this still life, number one, And John Marin exhibited his watercolor Broadway St. Paul Church, both from 1912, both quite realistic, recognizable, representational. At the famous, or more accurately, infamous Armory Show of 1913, European paintings exhibited included Henri Matisse's Luxury 2 from 1907 or 8, but it was a depiction of another woman, Marcel Duchamp's Nude Descending a Staircase, number 2, 1912, that received the most ridicule, a work mocked as Food Descending a Staircase was created as a pun parody. Constantine Brancusi's portrait of Mademoiselle Poligny from 1912, carved of white marble, simplified and abstracted the female form to pure geometric shapes. Pablo Picasso's Woman with a Mustard Pot, 1910, is painted in the style of analytical cubism, and Kandinsky's improvisation number 27, Garden of Love, is entirely abstract, intentionally omitting a recognizable subject. The 1913 Armory Show, controversial as it was, as highly criticized as it was, or perhaps because of these reasons, brought modern art to the attention of the American public. The American art historian Barbara Rose called the Armory Show success by scandal, which I think is a wonderful way of summing it up. In fact, the Armory Show changed the path of American art, and after controversy, acceptance gradually followed. If this is background on the early 20th century art world, we return to O'Keeffe. She painted Lake George, New York State, 1922. She's working here in oil on canvas. Each year, starting in 1923, Stieglitz gave her a solo exhibition. Her fame grew. The prices of her paintings soared. She established a style of beautiful color harmonies and smooth undulating shapes that she would maintain for decades. Gray line with black, blue, and yellow from about 1923. O'Keeffe came into her own as an artist in the 1920s. In 1924, she began the famous paintings of large flowers. To be more accurate, large paintings of large flowers. With these, her popularity as an artist increased. The first large flower close-up was Petunia number 2, 1924. She said, "When you take a flower in your hand and really look at it, it's your world for the moment. I want to give that world to someone else. Most people in the city rush around so they have no time to look at a flower. I want them to see it." She adds, whether they want to or not. Flower abstraction, 1924, pale pastel pinks, warm, sensuous, diaphanous, overlapping tissue, thin, curving shapes. Because of paintings like this and the nude photographs, Freudian interpreters found symbols of female genitalia in her work, which she repeatedly denied. In this year, 1924, Stieglitz was granted a divorce. O'Keeffe and Stieglitz promptly married. John Marin was the best man at the wedding. Autumn Leaves was painted at Lake George, 1924, documenting the effect of the changing seasons on nature's color palette. And this is called From the Lake, number 1, painted 1924, still oil on canvas. O'Keeffe's summers were now spent at Lake George with Stieglitz's family. Here is a photo of O'Keeffe in 1924. She's now 37, taken by Stieglitz. She was wonderfully photogenic, and he was a superb photographer. The following year, 1925, her large flower paintings were included in a group show called Seven Americans. The other six were Marin, Dove, Demuth, Hartley, Stieglitz, and the photographer, Paul Strand. She paints purple petunias, 1926, typical of O'Keeffe. A natural form, usually, not always, usually a flower, is seen close up and enlarged to the extent that it approaches an abstract pattern and may be viewed in this way. Her profound love of nature is the starting point. The colors are rich, saturated, splendid, and varied. O'Keeffe depicted flowers of many types, lovingly, accurately, although not actually scientifically. Yellow Calla, about 1926, she said that she tried to convey her experience with the flower and explained that she began very realistically, but that as she repeatedly painted the same subject, the organic imagery gradually evolved under her brush, moving in the direction of abstraction. Pansy, 1926, artfully composed, simplicity. Morning Glory with Black, 1926. When seen so close up, this appears almost abstract. I think it's easy to ignore the fact that there is an underlying, recognizable, identifiable subject. And this is simply titled Abstraction, 1926, painted with the same colors. Only a small step was taken to reach pure abstraction. This is now called Abstraction White Rose, 1927. Without knowing the title, I would not have recognized this as a white rose. I think it looks more like a swirling tornado. Red Cannas, 1927. Intense colors. Similarly, Poppy, 1927, and Oriental Poppies, 1928. O'Keeffe said, these are her words, she's speaking, I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way, things I had no words for. White Flower, 1929. But she also said, I hate flowers. I paint them because they're cheaper than models and they don't move. Iris, 1929. The entire focus is on the flower. It fills the canvas. Nothing else is included. The flower is everything. Gray, blue, and black pink circle, 1929, implies movement, swirling around and round with the several little stalks seemingly trying to avoid being swallowed up. The darkest one in the center is a strong vertical, putting on the brakes aesthetically. While O'Keeffe is most famous for the close-ups of flowers, she also painted very different subjects. For example, she depicted distant views of large-scale buildings related to her Manhattan experience, New York with moon, the shape simplified into silhouettes, and the three circles. I put arrows to make it obvious, linking the composition together. This is called Street New York, number 1, the view looking down one of the canyon-like streets in Manhattan. Specific buildings attracted her attention. This is the Radiator Building at night, which was built in 1924 and painted by O'Keeffe in 1927. I'm putting on an old photo of it so you can compare. Later, O'Keeffe returned to a New York City subject when she painted Brooklyn Bridge, 1949. This is the actual bridge today, right beside Pace in Manhattan, of course. Here is a photo of Stieglitz and O'Keeffe kissing at Lake George, 1929. However, Stieglitz had already embarked on an affair with Dorothy Norman. She was a photographer. They met in 1927 when she was 21 and he was 63, making him literally 3 times her age. She had come into Stieglitz's gallery and began working there as a volunteer. Norman was also an art patron, and she helped to finance his third gallery. And she was an author. She wrote 2 volumes about Stieglitz. Like O'Keeffe, she posed for Stieglitz. O'Keeffe, seeking a different location and source of inspiration, traveled in 1929 with her friend Rebecca Strand, wife of the photographer Paul Strand. Rebecca Strand also posed nude for Stieglitz. They traveled by train to Santa Fe, New Mexico. O'Keeffe would return frequently thereafter. She set up a painting studio. She explored the mountains and deserts. In the same year, she went to Taos and painted the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, which is the mission church of the mission church at Ranchos de Taos in New Mexico, settled in 1716 by the Spanish. This small Spanish colonial Catholic church was built between about 1772 and 1815 or 16 for the Franciscan Fathers. Please compare O'Keeffe's painting to the actual church, which is preceded by an enclosed courtyard. I was photographing from the outside of the courtyard wall, which is where O'Keeffe was when she painted this. Well, she depicted the church repeatedly. It is her subject for the Gate of an Adobe Church, 1929. And again, I ask you to please compare to the actual church. The appeal of this building comes largely from the material used. It is constructed, like many other Spanish missions in New Mexico, of adobe, which is sun-dried brick. It's a very old building material. Adobe was used in Spain from at least as early as the 8th century. The ancient Egyptians built with sun-dried mud brick. This is practical, inexpensive construction material still used around the world. The surfaces of an adobe building may be given a smooth plaster coating and painted as you see it here. The building's edges are softened, rounded by the repeated resurfacing and the passing of time, adding to its sculptural, handcrafted appeal. O'Keeffe also painted the church from the back, large, simple geometric shapes, what I would call sculptural architecture. Again, please compare the actual church today to her painting. Massive buttresses of tamped earth were added to support the walls. The thick masonry walls and the limited window areas are well adapted to the hot, sunny summers here. From 1929 to 49, O'Keeffe spent part of every year in New Mexico. She hiked, she rafted, she painted the scenery, including the flowers and the bones and rocks she found. Nature provided her preferred subject matter. Nature's creations distilled their essential essence, examined, and then depicted in beautiful colors, shapes, and lines, as in this painting of apple blossoms from 1930. Intrigued by light and color, she said in the year she painted this, color is one of the great things in the world that makes life worth living to me. Jack in the Pulpit, number 4, also 1930, the blue and green interior of the flower. She said, I decided that if I could paint that flower on a huge scale, you could not ignore its beauty. It is as if O'Keeffe takes you inside of the flower. Yet she also painted subjects unlikely to be admired for their beauty. For example, Jawbone and Fungus, again, 1930. Or Cow's Skull, Red, White, and Blue, 1931. The skull is removed from its original location, taken out of context, and in fact may actually have been painted at Lake George. O'Keeffe mailed some bones to New York so that she could paint them there. The colors of the American flag are combined with the shape of a Christian cross. Cow's Skull with Calico Roses, 1932, may be considered an odd and possibly slightly unnerving combination. In fact, in this year, 1932, she had a nervous breakdown. She was hospitalized and did not paint for almost a year. She recuperated in Bermuda and then returned to New Mexico. Floating in the Sky, Ram's Skull, White Hollyhock, and Little Hills, 1935, has an eerie surrealist quality. The impossible is painted to appear tangible. Deer's Skull with Pedernal Mountain, which is Spanish for Flint Hill, there in the background. It has a distinctive shape. Pedernal has a flat top. This is near O'Keeffe's house in New Mexico, painted in 1936. I would describe this as curiously creepy. This is a painting of things associated with death and decay, with things of the desert that have been dried, desiccated by the passing of time. Photo of Stieglitz and O'Keeffe in 1936 at Lake George. But their marriage had become difficult and they often lived far from one another. Pink Shell with Seaweed, about 1937. The subject of a shell, like that of the flowers, seemed so close, up, enlarged far beyond its actual size, verges on a spiral abstraction. O'Keeffe was commissioned to make 2 paintings in Hawaii for the Hawaiian Pineapple Company. It's known today as Dole. She went to Hawaii in 1938 and she produced many paintings, but not of pineapples. Only after she returned to New York did she paint the pineapple in 1939 using a plant the company had mailed to her as a model. Narcissa's Last Orchid, 1941. This is now pastel. Pastel is colored chalk on paper. It depicts an orchid O'Keeffe was given by her neighbor. O'Keeffe uses subtle shading to create translucent, filmy, fluttering forms, supple, subtle, sumptuous, even sensuous. White Flower on Red Earth, number 1 from 1943. Called an American modernist, O'Keeffe's interests were not in the traditional subjects, which would be portraiture, history, mythology, literature, or religion. Instead, she focused almost exclusively on her surroundings, distant, such as the cityscapes and landscapes, and more often close, such as the flowers. All were immobile subjects that permitted her intensive scrutiny and that did not seek to engage her in conversation. Cottonwood Tree in Spring, 1943, looking very full and healthy. There's a contrast, a dead cottonwood tree. It's at Abiquiu, New Mexico, 1943. Very different. A photo of Stieglitz and O'Keeffe sitting together, but I want to show you another photo of them together. 1944, this conveys a different mood and relationship. In 1946, Stieglitz had a cerebral blood clot and died soon after. His ashes were scattered at Lake George. It then took 3 years to settle his estate. When that process was completed, O'Keeffe moved permanently to New Mexico. From 1949 until her death in 1986, she lived in New Mexico permanently. Therefore, I want to show you Georgia O'Keeffe's two homes in New Mexico. Here we are, New Mexico. The two homes were quite close to one another. She first visited this area of New Mexico in 1929 as the summer house guest of her friend Mabel Dodge Lujan. New Mexico offered freedom unavailable to her in New York, and that meant freedom from Stieglitz, his circle, and his family, as well as from Stieglitz's affair with Dorothy Norman. She painted Purple Hills near Abiquiu, oil on canvas. She added what are referred to as Southwestern themes to her repertoire of subjects based on the landscape of New Mexico. She loved the stark sunlit rocks and desert. She described the view in a letter written to Arthur Dove in terms of color. She says, "I wish you could see what I see out the window, the earth pink and yellow cliffs to the north, the full pale moon about to go down in an early morning lavender sky, pink and purple hills in front, and the scrubby fine dull green cedars." She goes on to say, "It is a very beautiful world." O'Keeffe rented an adobe summer home here with wonderful views. The house, built in the early 1930s on a remote 7-acre piece of land within the vast Ghost Ranch located in the Valley of the Shining Stone north of Abiquiu, New Mexico, which is northwest of Santa Fe. The flat-topped mountain, which she loved and painted, you see it there in the distance, that's Pedernal. This photo shows her sitting on the roof of her house at Ghost Ranch. She sometimes slept up here, and this is her depiction. It's called The Patio Number 1, 1940. The house is U-shaped in plan, has a central patio with wooden posts. She painted her surroundings, or more accurately, select portions of them. The actual house today, adobe bricks, mentioned before, are made from a mixture of water, sand, and clay with some kind of fibrous or organic material such as straw or sticks or manure or a combination of these materials. The recipe, should you wish to try this, is basically 50% sand, 35% clay, and 15% fibrous material. Mix it up. Put it into brick-shaped frames of various sizes, and you then let it dry in the sun. The frames, though, are removed quite soon. The bricks are then turned on their sides and allowed to dry slowly to minimize later cracking. O'Keeffe lived here part of the year from 1934 onward, and actually bought the house in 1940 from Arthur Pack. Now, the land was expanded. It now has 12 acres. So please enter. With its small scale and thick adobe walls, they're 4 feet thick, it offers an intimate, earthy, appealing environment. O'Keeffe's life here was simple, spare, and Spartan, if not austere. However, I believe that no home decor is complete without an animal skull hanging on the wall, and animal bones and branches are displayed on the low wood shelves. That is her lounge chair. Her studio also has whitewashed walls and hardwood floors. Today, the house has been restored accurately, furnished as it was when she lived here. The dining room with its wood beam ceiling. There is one of her rock collections arranged on wall ledges. She picked up stones, shells, and bones on her daily walks. In her home, as in her paintings, she sought the simplest essence of nature. This is the breakfast room with its minimalist furnishings. That table is nothing fancy. It's made out of plywood. The glass walls provide unobstructed views of the multicolored cliffs. They became her subject matter. The kitchen, looking into the breakfast room, O'Keeffe lived in a light, pale pastel environment oriented to views of the surrounding landscape. As to conveniences and comforts, electricity came from a generator. There was no telephone. Daily life was structured. Get up early, walk with the dogs, eat breakfast, go out and paint all day, walk, eat dinner, sleep, repeat. She drank chamomile tea. She listened to classical music. Her preferred form of transportation was her Model A Ford. Although she received various guests at the ranch, she is often described as a loner. You hear that word repeatedly. She lived an isolated life here, which to her equated with freedom. Reclusive by nature, she said, I find people very difficult. Stieglitz never visited her in New Mexico, but she did write to him frequently from here. In 1945, O'Keeffe purchased another house, uh, which uh, has 3 acres. It is nearby in the village of Abiquiu. She lived in both the Ghost Ranch house that you just saw and also in this Abiquiu house from 1949 to 1984. She divided her time between the two homes. Now, among the reasons she wanted this specific house, in spite of its then dilapidated condition, was that it had water and gardens, and she wanted to be able to grow her own fruits and vegetables. But the house was owned by the Catholic Church, and they did not want to sell. She finally convinced the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Santa Fe. It took nearly 15 years of her persuasive powers. The church had paid $1 for it. O'Keeffe paid the church $10 for it. The house, made of adobe, was in a ruined state when she bought it. It was a Spanish colonial era house. Parts may date back to the mid 18th century. Several years of restoration were required before she could move in. Between 1945 and 49, the house was renovated under the guidance of Maria Chabot, a friend, assistant, seen here in 1944, working with mud stucco. A carefully constructed and controlled environment was created, very precise, with high standards of work and simple furnishings. O'Keeffe liked the views of the landscape around the house. She planted a garden. You are looking into one of the bedrooms. And here is a photo of the door in the patio wall of the house, and notice the repeat pattern of units of 4 tiles. She painted the large wooden door in the patio many times. Black door with red, 1954, depicts the adobe architecture and the little floor tiles. My point that I want to make is that this painting is not as abstract as one might suspect at first glance. In the patio includes little more than a black square, an opening in the patio wall. The patio and the patio, black door, 1955, seen on an angle, and the patio door with the green leaf, 1956. After Stieglitz's death, her house in Abiquiu was often her subject. The appearance of the interior in O'Keeffe's time was recorded in old black and white photographs, which I want to show you. The living room with its wood beam ceiling, very simple, plain, The walls are of natural gray earth. The effect is calm, peaceful. Today, you may visit the interior, but you are not permitted to photograph. However, the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe generously provided me with color photographs to show you, which I interspersed with the black and whites. Bookshelves are built into the thickness of the adobe walls. Benches are made from the same material with cushions. This photo of her uh, of her studio was taken in 1977. Compare the branch on the left, which inspired the painting on the right, which I show you here. She copied the shape of the branch quite precisely. O'Keeffe in her studio, where the tables are made out of plywood, as simple and stark as this may be, there is Alexander Calder's mobile hanging here, which maintains the minimalist style of sleek shapes. Otherwise, the decoration consists largely of things she found on her walks in the desert and hills: rocks, skulls, antlers, and bones. So I show you here a photo of O'Keeffe under antlers, 1956. Let's keep wandering. Here is the kitchen. She canned and froze the produce from her garden. Here is the pantry. Today, the house is maintained just as it was when she lived here, and even the view remains. Georgia O'Keeffe was a favorite subject of many photographers, in addition to Stieglitz throughout her long life. Here you see her in profile wearing a white headscarf, snapped by the famous photographer Ansel Adams. Her striking facial features and her reputation as the creative, independent woman fascinated. I want to show you a photo because I like it very much. It is this of O'Keeffe, pinky raised, looking mischievously at Orville Cox, who was described as her ghost ranch wrangler from 1937. This was taken in Arizona, also by Ansel Adams. And here she is hitching a ride on a Harley Davidson motorcycle in 1944, going to Abiquiu, photographed by her friend Maria Chabot. The man is a friend. He's a painter, Maurice Grosser. A photo of O'Keeffe in Abiquiu, 1950, and a photo of O'Keeffe in her studio in 1953. Over the years, various people stayed here as her guests, friends, her sister Claudia, Maria Chabot, and others. They had the companionship of O'Keeffe's two large black dogs. These are chows. She liked the breed. She had a total of 6 chows. Perhaps surprisingly, she said of herself, "I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life." And then she added, not surprisingly, "and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do." Late in life, she began to suffer from a loss of central vision due to macular degeneration. From 1972 on, she required assistance to paint in oils, yet she continued to work in pencil and charcoal until 1984. Enter Juan Hamilton, young, handsome, helpful potter who came to her house in 1973. He needed work. She needed help. Soon he became her full-time employee, described as closest confidant, companion, and business manager. He helped her learn to work in clay, making pottery. She returned to working in watercolor. In 1976, she wrote a book about her art. 1984, her declining health prompted her to move to Santa Fe. But I want to point out that she was then 97 years old. Now, I usually show only one photo or like one self-portrait of an artist. Stieglitz took this photo of O'Keeffe, young and beautiful. It's the photo with which I started this lecture. But because O'Keeffe lived to be 98, I thought you might find it interesting to see her also old and beautiful. In a world where artists are likely to be lauded more loudly after death, O'Keeffe lived so long that she was able to enjoy her fame. Major exhibitions of her work were already held at the Art Institute of Chicago in 1943, at MoMA in Manhattan in 1946, the Whitney Museum of American Art in 1970. There were traveling exhibitions of her work in 1966 and 70. She lived almost a century, working until she died, which was March 6th, 1986. Her ashes were scattered from the top of her much loved Pedernal Mountain as she requested. She had a will, but codicils that were added later said that her entire estate was to go to Juan Hamilton. Her family contested the will, and the situation was settled out of court. Much of her estate went to the Georgia O'Keeffe Foundation and then to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe. In conclusion, Georgia O'Keeffe, her early drawings and paintings were abstract, non-objective, favoring instead harmonies of colors, subtle and selective. Do you find her enlarged flowers? Do her enlarged flowers leave you surprised to find nature's creations have been supersized? Her enormous flowers bring Little Shop of Horrors to mind, but the behavior of O'Keeffe's plants is far more refined. Other subjects, soaring marvels as the architecture of New York City. O'Keeffe created an artistic rendering of Manhattan's nitty-gritty. An animal skull as subject matter is an unusual selection, yet painted with patriotism, symbolism, and perfection. With her need for freedom and open space, the place she loved best was northern New Mexico and the American Southwest. If you share the aesthetic preferences of O'Keeffe, you might choose to go to St. Francis of Assisi in New Mexico. In homes of her own, she finally had her own place with views, a garden, privacy, and personal space. She depicted her two homes in New Mexico repeatedly in paintings verging on abstraction in their simplicity. For Georgia O'Keeffe, a rugged, colorful, simple, natural environment was a fundamental mental health requirement. I conclude with a confession, for I wish to confide that I would love to be there, walking with Georgia O'Keeffe as my guide. Thank you. Now, I actually want to pose a question to all of you, to my audience, and I would like to hear what you have to say, what your responses might be to this question. O'Keeffe's flower paintings are pretty. They have the quality of beauty. Renoir said, a painting ought to be pretty. Yes, pretty. There are enough boring things in this world without our making more. Monet's paintings, also focusing on flowers, are pretty. They have beauty. Matisse said a painting should be like an armchair in which to rest. So my question to you is beauty a requirement for art? And I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
May I? This is Kim. Hi, Janetta.
Hi, I'm delighted to see you.
Thank you for a marvelous talk. I really feel I know Georgia O'Keeffe so much better than I did before. My thought is yes, but beauty can be defined in infinite ways. And so the possibilities are endless.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yes, but also I just think that beauty can be something that is disturbing and yet somehow is resolved through the work of art. And so beauty it doesn't necessarily, I don't think all art has to be pretty, but I do think art ultimately it must be beautiful, but beauty does not need to mean comforting and pleasing in all ways. I guess that's the way I'd put it.
You're making the distinction between beauty and pretty.
I am, yes, yes, yes. I think beauty can be more profound and more complex. I do, I think so.
Very good, very interesting.
Yes, just my thoughts.
Oh,
On a different day, I might,
have a
I
different.
might be there championing pretty.
I'm
May
right
I,
there with you.
I like pretty.
may I, Janetta?
Yes,
Sometimes
Diane.
I'm thinking of mathematicians. When a formula works perfectly, they see it as beautiful. Sometimes something that's perfect, whether it be perfectly ugly or perfectly, it's just so itself. It's just so, it just seems so right that we look at it as perfect.
Perfection as a desirable quality.
Making it beautiful.
Making it beautiful. Okay.
Here I really was thinking of mathematicians who see a formula and it's just perfect. So it's beautiful.
Yes, yes, definitely. More thoughts, comments?
I was just thinking that, who would find beauty in a dead animal's skull, right? But Georgia did, and is truly, I don't know, it's like something that the animal gave its life, the finding beauty in this kind of wasteland kind of find that she came to, but then being able to show it with the shapes and the paint and the way that she put it out there was just, I don't know, I think I probably one of the few people I ask my kids every year for Christmas, please, I really want a cow skull because I want to paint from that like Georgia did. But that's beautiful. So beauty is in so many different things. It is in death. It is in these ugly things and these things that we don't want to see and we look away from. But then when you look to it and you see, wait, that it had a purpose, it had its life, or it had its, it fulfilled what it was doing, like the cow that gave its life for her, for her sculpture there in her house.
I have to ask you, did you ask your children for a picture of a skull or an actual skull?
Oh no, I want a skull.
You want a
I said,
skull?
I want one because I want to put it up in my studio and paint from it every now and then when I'm feeling very, I need to connect with Georgia today.
I'm just wondering, how do you get one? Will Amazon deliver if you Google this?
Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to look into this further. Put it on my wish list every year.
Cow skull.
Mhm.
More thoughts on this? That was very interesting. More thoughts, comments?
Hi,
Someone,
Janetta. This is Cecilia.
go ahead.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure you could hear me.
Yes.
Obviously, the pictures you're showing us are beautiful, and there's a lot of beautiful art. However, some art is meant to be controversial or questioning. So I don't think all art is beautiful. I think all art has something to say. It depends on what the artist is trying to communicate. When you see Civil War paintings or charge of whatever that the Europeans have made over the years that we see in the museums, those are not necessarily beautiful. They are certain statements, I think. And I guess in their rights, they are beautiful, as I think Kim said. However, I think they're not meant to be beautiful. They're meant to be statements.
Or perhaps documents, historical
Documentation, yes,
documents, in
yes.
a sense, visual records of things that have
Yes.
happened. In terms of sort of that idea, there are works of art that are purposefully, intentionally offensive And it does attract attention, and
Correct.
museums have gotten themselves in trouble for exhibiting certain things to bring in an audience. I was also thinking, if you're familiar with Donatello, early Italian Renaissance artist, his depiction of Mary Magdalene, which is a standing female nude, which is traditionally a subject depicted. It's the most popular subject in the history of art, but he depicts Mary Magdalene as this older, emaciated, desiccated woman dressed in only her hair, and she is not pretty in any way, and yet she does elicit an emotional response. So I'd like to add that to the discussion. If must a work of art produce, elicit, induce a reaction, an emotional reaction of some sort, either positive or negative or neutral from the viewer, does that make it any better?
I think if you feel no empathy toward the work of art, it has not met its goal to communicate. So you have to feel something, whether it's beauty, anger, a disgust, whatever. There's that painting that was done that the guy put dung on the picture. I think it was Magdalene or something, or maybe Mary, and that would cause such an outcry. I saw the picture. I'm not drawn to it. It is really rather distasteful, but it does elicit an emotion. These give you a different emotion. The Monet gives you a peaceful sense. The Renoir does not give you as much peace, or at least me as much peace, because I don't have the blue water behind it. It gives me more of maybe a family moment or a gift. So, I think everything has an interpretation and wants to communicate something. And it's whether you understand, how you view it through your experiences. So the artist may have a total different idea, but we've all seen enough art in our times in different museums. And there's some you could walk away and never look at again. And there's others you'll stand for hours and stare at. So
I actually consider that one of the tests for quality art. Would you come back to it again and again? Or once you've seen it, that's all you need? My students this afternoon, my honors college students, were talking about the painting white on white. It's white. And I have watched people standing in front of it, but they walk away and they don't come back.
many years ago, MoMA had a blue canvas. I forget who painted it. I couldn't stop looking at it. It was it was gorgeous. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. It was just a blue painting on a canvas.
Blue.
It was blue. I don't know if that's the true name of it, but I forget what it was, but it was in an exhibition in MoMA back in the 70s.
And it did hold your attention.
Absolutely. And it was only blue. It was just a blue canvas. You could paint it yourself.
That's fascinating. That is very interesting for me to hear.
It's odd to think that O'Keeffe didn't like flowers. She seems to paint them as if she loves them.
I think she did love them. I think she was probably.
You look at this
sarcastic.
one and it's almost velvety. It's just so beautiful. It's hard to think. She must have loved them.
Yes.
I just wanted to share, someone sent me something in the chat in reference to your first question. Beauty, standard notions of symmetry and pleasing color combinations is not requirement for art. A universal message and an evocative medium is necessary.
A message there. It needs to say something, to tell you something, or make you feel perhaps something. Seems, if I've understood correctly. Any other thoughts?
And our feelings change as we age. What you would have looked at when you were 20, you may find no appeal at 40 or 50.
Interesting.
I think also when you learn things about an artist, like I've been a Georgia O'Keeffe fan for a long time, but I never really enjoyed the cow skull images until I learned more about her. And then I visited that area as an adult rather than as I'd been there as a child. I'd always enjoyed certain things that she'd done. And then the more I learned about her, the more I actually enjoyed a much broader, many more of her paintings than I did when I was 16.
And there's some artists, no matter how much you try to like them, you cannot get to like them. They just do not communicate to you. You don't have a feeling for them.
I think art all has its audience, it finds its audience. So you might not feel anything, but somebody else might. So it makes it legitimate for sure. But I think of art too as being sort of like movies. Which movies do you go back and watch and rewatch? Which ones stand the test of time or just don't age well? And so really great art, that's why it's lasted. That's why it's around and we're still talking about it, because there was something there. There's something that communicated something, feeling, and to somebody, to enough people.
You're raising an important issue. Why is it that some artists, some musicians, writers stand the test of time? What is it about them that appeals to a great many people in many geographic areas over centuries? What do they have that strikes a chord with so many people?
They find something that's universal.
How do you
I
do
don't even
that?
think they realized it, but they touch on something which is a universal and that people can relate to.
How do you do it?
I don't think they even know.
My thought about that would be authenticity. I think that great artists are not so very much focused on what the reception of the work will be. They may be focused on that. Of course, many artists have very great egos to go with, but I think ultimately they are seeing with so much integrity. So the way I noticed a consistency in Georgia O'Keeffe's work. It wasn't a flatness or repetitiveness, but one felt the Georgia O'Keeffe, even the lines of her face are somehow reflected in that clarity of all her lines and compositions. So I think it's something that the artist is ultimately, the true artist is being true to him or her or their self, and so that they will get multiple positive and negative reactions, but they have given something true that people can then receive as a truth that travels across time.
Something of themselves, something.
Yes, something that they see. She's showing us the world the way she sees it. As you had said, she's not saying, oh, I'll make an abstract painting. She's actually showing places that look quite like they do in her paintings, and yet they look like her paintings. She's filtering experience through her authentic way of looking at the world, and by sharing that with others, that makes it universal. She's not trying to appeal to the whole world, but by sharing something that is unique to her, she's making it universal. That's my thought.
Is that Kim speaking?
It is. It's Kim. She's running off again.
No. Wow, that was well said.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
As I look at this, I also think, I'm sorry to say so much, I also think about the fact that most of these artists are very unhappy people. I mean, it seems that life itself, they're not happy people, and yet they create.
Well, Renoir would be the ultimate example of that. If everyone is familiar with the story, Renoir was somebody who really loved life, and life did not treat him well from a physical point of view. He was thoroughly crippled, type of arthritis, rheumatic, and confined to a wheelchair. He had the brush strapped or taped to his hand so he could continue to paint. And when asked, how did he manage to paint such beautiful figures, such beautiful paintings in view of his physical condition? And his answer was, he did not paint with his hands, he painted with his heart. And this is how he did it. He went right on, by the way, painting female nudes to the end of his life. So he loved life. He viewed painting as the best medicine for his chronic pain. Any further, or?
Maybe I misinterpreted a little bit, but it seemed like when she got into the flowers, and that's when everybody started to think, oh, she's so great. And I almost kind of think she was catering a bit to her audience and like building upon that popularity. So I almost wonder if she's, I mean, this is a job for her, right? So like
Yes.
almost like a monetary, like, okay, people like this, let me paint more flowers. Just like, Agatha Christie, she came up with a formula on how to write books that everybody loved. And that's what she did. So I almost a little bit don't feel like it's totally her heart and soul. It's like, oh, this is what I need to do to make it as an artist.
The exception to that, and what you're saying, Pablo Picasso, who is successful with analytical cubism, but goes on and produces collage cubism. That works too, yet he goes on to synthetic cubism. That's a success, but yet he will go on and paint simultaneously in this classical period. And he did go from style to style to style. Each one is new. So he didn't, I'm going to say, sit back and rest on his laurels and just keep painting in the same style. Monet's style of painting is remarkably consistent throughout his life.
But Monet had the challenge, of chasing that light and capturing the color next to color and all of that. And so I think I don't look at Georgia as, I mean, painting flowers over and over again. I mean, she had to be just captivated by it. I think any artist, if you're not captivated by what you're painting and it's not exciting you, you're not solving a problem with it or trying to figure things out, then, it just becomes rote, and that's not going to come off in your paintings. It's not going to come off as that truth that we were talking about. To have that truth be received by the people that are viewing it, it has to actually be there. And for her paintings, I mean, it is, I think, rather than a formula.
I think that she likes the flowers, but like she says she hates them, which makes me think, like it kind of is a job, and she gets sick of it, and then she kind of switches what she's painting, and then she comes back to them. And I don't, I think that we all kind of come and go with things that we like and don't like. Like I like to switch what hobby I do like every couple months because I get bored, and then you come back to it and you feel refreshed, right? So
in a way, she's perfecting these flowers. She just paints them and they're so perfect. This idea of perfectionism was raised before. I see that in her houses too.
I think that what she was after was less about the flowers, but having the subject matter to abstract from. I think she was more of the European school of abstraction, taking something from nature and abstracting it in a sense, versus, what would come later or what was happening with Kandinsky and such, just abstracting from extemporaneous abstraction. So, I think the flowers, like she said, they don't move. And so that gave her a subject to work from.
They don't move and they don't try to ask
Talk
her
back to you.
questions. Right, they don't talk to her. She said she finds people very difficult. Words are not her friends. So flowers would seem to be the perfect companions.
I think it's interesting too that of the four images that you showed, hers show the view from the camera's eye. So, we're talking about modernism and the Industrial Revolution, and she was married to Stieglitz, who was a photographer. She also did some photography of her own, but she has that cropped image, and she starts to use it just like Degas did to abstract forms and work with the positive and the negative space in different ways.
The cropped forms that give you that close-up look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good point.
Great job, Janetta.
Thank you. Who's talking?
Carolyn. I teach painting with you guys. I'm not there this semester, but
I can't see who it is.
Yeah.
Also,
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Thank you.
Beautiful, Janetta. Really beautiful.
Thank
You make me sorry that I don't know more about art.
Oh, come
Really
and Join
I've
one
always
of my
enjoyed-
classes.
I've always enjoyed your presentations. They just make me appreciate.
Oh, join one of my classes. You could come.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are
And
there any other questions, from anybody? Or comments?
So I want to share with you though, if I can, my
We'll
favorite.
have to find
Georgia-
out the best way to do that.
My
We'll have to find
oh,
out
I
from
just-
Michelle how to join your class.
Oh,
Oh yeah, you could. My favorite Georgia O'Keeffe is actually at the Art Institute of Chicago, and it's called Sky Above Clouds.
oh,
and it's-
I didn't
love
include it.
that.
Yeah. And, you know, she was in her late 70s or 80s when she painted that. And it's 22 feet long. It was inside of her garage, and she rushed to complete it before the winter cold set in because she was working in her garage. And I want to be like Georgia. That's what I want to do. But it was supposed to go on to San Francisco, to the Legion of the Palace of Honor in San Francisco, and it was too large to fit in the doors. So it remained permanently at the Art Institute of Chicago, and it's in the stairway in the back of the American wing. And when my kids were little, we lived outside of Chicago, so we'd go there and we'd have to visit it, and they'd make this bullet, you know, this beeline straight to that staircase. And you know, we were talking about what does the viewer take away from the work, and this work was inspired by her first airplane trip, and she could see the clouds, you know, the ground and the clouds, and she's up above them. So she did a series of them, and it's so funny because whenever I tell my students about this painting, I always tell them how, you know, my kids would stand at the top of the staircase, and the best way to view it is you like teeter on the edge and you peer over the edge of the staircase, and it feels like you're floating, you know, like you're actually above the clouds. It couldn't have been hung in a better place. So you have that, like, that anticipation of this something that's incredible, and you experience the fascination of flight and just the excitement. Like, I don't know. So it always sticks with me. And my kids knew exactly where that painting was. They were like 5 and 7, and they're like, "Come on, mommy, we want to get there before you." So
I think your kids were very lucky.
I don't know. They
I-
won't tell you that they were.
I'll tell them. I'll tell them that they were. I did have that painting in another one of those, that aerial view in the lecture. I took them out, and because the lecture is too long, when I do these, when I make a PowerPoint and go through it, they're invariably too long. And
Right. Yeah.
I don't throw it away though. I cut out sections of the text and I put it at the very end. I then print it out in 8-point font so it doesn't take up much space. And I take the extra slides and I label them extra, and I put them into the PowerPoint at the very end. So you don't see them, but I keep them just in case somebody will let me give a longer lecture. It's right there.
Awesome. Well, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I have a couple of my classmates are here. Renee's here. She's we're all MFA grad students at Savannah College of Art and Design.
Oh,
And yeah, and another classmate, Celeste, is here as well. So yep, I sent out emails. I'm like, you guys have to come.
oh, thank
Oh,
you.
thank you, Caroline. It was so
Thank
nice of you
you.
to invite us.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you
Really
for
fun.
doing that.
If there aren't any other questions or comments, I would like to say thank you so much. I enjoyed this myself. This is fun for me to get to do programs that I enjoy too. So thank you so much, Dr. Benton.
Oh, you can Janetta me.
Janetta,
Michelle.
trying to be professional. Thank you, Janetta. And if
Pleasure.
any alumni are still on the call, please, you know, I see Cecilia. So check our website for upcoming programs, alumni.pace.edu. We have the Back to Class series will be continuing. We're doing some finance series sessions, and we'll be doing some more things in the next few months. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I really hope you enjoyed it. And thank you all for coming out and spending the evening with us. And thank you, Janetta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank